Hello and welcome to yet another awesome, amazing, interesting podcast from Sustainability Sisters. Today we are super excited and super honored to have with us Professor Sanjeeb Kakoty. He's a distinguished academic, storyteller, and sustainability thought leader. His work bridges the gap between age-old wisdom and contemporary challenges, offering a fresh perspective on how businesses and communities can thrive in harmony with the environment. Through his teachings, research, and storytelling, he continues to inspire change makers to view sustainability not just as an obligation, but as an opportunity for growth and innovation. Join us as we deep dive into Professor Kakoty's insights, exploring the transformative potential of Indigenous knowledge and practices. This session was such a pleasure to record. So watch it in the end and let us know in comments what did you learn today. Enjoy. So welcome Professor Kakoty. And so we will start with a brief introduction from me and from Sanjari. So I am masters in environmental science and engineering from IIT Bombay. So I finished my masters in 2015, and then I was under a PhD project. It was called Climate Change Impact Assessment on Himalayan Glaciers. And so that was the first time I actually started looking into the grave impacts of climate change and how fast it is actually accelerating the climate tipping points. So at that time, I was not only under PhD and so extreme pressure, plus also I'm reading all of these papers, and so I was really depressed. And like all the papers that I read, like now we are seeing all the glacier melt videos. So at one point, which is called the tipping point, after that there's no going back for the environmental system. So the speed at which the glaciers are melting, all of that, it just made me like super anxious. And then there were other things like personal, and 2020 we saw COVID. So I decided that it's time let me start working. So I came into the field of sustainable finance. So I have been associated with firms which are doing environmental impact assessment. So there I met Sanchari. So we met 4 years ago in our first firm, and then we have had, I think both of us, we worked in similar firms. Sanchari also worked with some consulting companies, and so basically we looked at ESG ratings. So we looked at the environment, social governance of the company, and then I also worked with the transitional finance, which means we looked at how company is moving towards net zero, or how they have processes in place for decarbonization. So now I'm working with a healthcare company. I'm looking at their sustainability reporting and decarbonization. Sanchari, over to you.
Thank you. I've also completed my master's. I did my MSc from Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Disaster Management. And there again, my thesis on landslide zonation mapping in the Darjeeling led me to believe that the main factor why Darjeeling is losing its ecosystem has been because of landslides, with the roads slumping down. And that's what got me into climate change. And since then, I've worked in the firms that Smarika has mentioned, currently consulting with a firm in climate change and decarbonization. I've also worked on sustainable finance projects, which is why I think both of us are so interested to explore financing sustainability and what is currently happening in the market related to it.
So we used to actually talk a lot about it within us. And so that's how Sustainability Sisters started. We are telling each other that this is also an area in which people are working. This is also an area. And then students started approaching us, and then we used to tell them, okay, what's happening, and then where can we contribute. So we thought, why not a channel? If someone asks us, we can send them the video right away. So that was the inspiration for Sustainability Sisters. So, Professor, you have been into the field of sustainability for very long. And how was your journey like? And you are in Northeast, so I'm assuming you have had a really good childhood in comparison to all of us who are now, like kids nowadays, they are stuck to only mobile phone. That's where they can find greenery around them. So how has your journey been like?
It's been an amazing journey for me. I've always felt blessed to be born in the Northeast,
Yeah.
that too in a place called Shillong, which is considered one of the most beautiful areas around. But slowly we are beginning to talk in the past tense.
Yes.
It used to be, it was very green, it was very less polluted. So we are catching up on the development race that the rest of the world has run and lost.
Yes.
So that's something. Well, first things first, I was quite intrigued by the name Sustainability Sisters, and I thought it was so apt because we call Earth as Mother Earth, Mother Nature. And Mother Nature is in serious problem. And suddenly you have the daughters coming up and saying, yes, Mom, you're in a bit of a mess, so we are there to help you. So congratulations for starting this.
Thank you. Thank you.
So essentially, I'm a historian and teaching in a management school. And I was not really interested in names and dates and kings and queens. I was essentially a historian, civilizational historian, trying to understand what makes civilizations grow and what makes them collapse.
Right.
So I was looking at technology as one of the major drivers of change in civilization. You introduce technology and then there are a lot of changes, both intended and most unintended, and it has a cascading effect on mankind. So like you were saying, the mobile phone is something which probably has had unintended consequences in social patterns, personal behaviors, things like that, which was never intended by the people who probably started it off.
Yes.
So plastics, you look at some of the healthcare, say CT scan, MRI, these were essentially devices that were produced for the defense industry, but they had their uses in the healthcare industry. So technology often has unintended consequences. So that is one thing that we need to understand, because as a historian, what I also learned early on, that it is not just enough to read history and learn about the past. It is also important to learn from the past, take lessons from there, and probably chart the path that we would want to go into. We just can't keep on going the way we have been doing. So there is this great writer, Daniel Quinn. At one point of time, he asked, supposing you embark on a journey, now you're in Bombay and you want to go to Bangalore, and you embark on a road trip, and you don't have Google Maps and all that, no markers on the road. And after traveling for maybe 500 kilometers, you realize that instead of Bangalore, you've gone east and you're nearing Calcutta.
Okay.
And what do you do now? You suddenly realize that you've gone on to Calcutta. And so any sane person would say that my destination is not Calcutta or Kolkata. Yeah. My destination is Bangalore. So I would turn back, right?
Yeah. Right.
So civilization started on a particular trajectory, trying to go someplace. And then suddenly we realized that this is not the place that we intended to come to. Yeah. But since we have traveled so far, we are saying that since we have traveled so far, let's keep on going, right? But any sane person would say that it's time to turn back.
Right.
For instance, Delhi, air has become so toxic that a colleague of mine who comes and teaches for some time in Shillong, finished his course and went back to Delhi, and within 2 days he was in hospital with bronchitis. And so I don't know whether it was interrelated, it was not, it was whatever, but the circumstances prove that the air was very, very difficult for him to tolerate. So children are affected. There are probably 9 out of 10 people in Delhi or larger cities with very toxic air are suffering the consequences. Now, we may call it as a inevitable part of development, or we may say that this is not the development, this is not the destination that we wanted, right?
Yeah.
So, but this is the time not to make those small incremental changes and say that, look, we are being sustainable. It is time to change the entire trajectory of our journey. Unless we do that, we are in for very bad times. So that is what has been my take on sustainability, that it's time for a radical change. It's not just enough to make small little changes and say that we are doing better.
Right.
You can't do something better if it's already bad, right? If something is already bad, you can't say that I'm doing a better job of this. Just stop doing it and do something else. So I am particularly enthused by young people like you, saying that here are a group of people who are finally standing up and saying that maybe we can do something about it. Things are in a mess. So that's the way it is. Coming back to the Northeast, this is one fascinating place in the entire world, where in such a small, compact geographical area, you have so many languages spoken. Some people would want to call it languages and dialects, but that's also a silly kind of a division. But as long as a language is different and unintelligible to the other, it is a different language. So around about 500 languages, tongues are spoken in this region, small little area. Yeah. Some people are as less as 100 or less than that in population terms. Yes. And the entire population of the Northeast could be less than Bombay, where you're sitting. So it's an amazing place with language, cultures, and a cultural and biodiversity that is unmatched. For instance, you have the floodplains, which are hot. Then you go up slightly temperate, you go up more, and then you ultimately end up with snow-capped mountains. So in one area, you have floodplains to snow-capped mountains, which means that the diversity of this region, biodiversity, is simply amazing. So it's considered a biodiversity hotspot. Yeah, but we are told, and maybe people like us are also responsible for it, because we parrot what is being said. We are told that the Northeast has remained undeveloped. So Northeast needs to develop. And development would mean what?
Losing all the systems.
Losing all of this. Whereas the quality of life is very good.
Yeah, and Nepal, coming with a similar background, has been able to conserve its biodiversity and economize it. So they are making money at the same time, and they're not letting their people's lives disrupt over financing development.
True, but probably they are doing a better job than us. But like they're saying that we are just doing better off a bad situation. So the trajectory needs to change. So yeah, I don't want it to end up as a monologue. So I think we should have your intervention so that we can talk more about it.
Sure, Professor Kakoty, you have worked with the indigenous knowledge system. So you have wrote a couple of papers about them. And like you mentioned, there are so many languages. So earlier it was a decentralized systems where small groups, they are taking care of themselves. They are self-sufficient. They have some practices which are aligned with nature. Now all of that is getting lost, probably due to globalization, technology. Do you feel now, can we go back? Can we turn? Like possibly now we are very close to Kolkata. It's like that.
It's difficult, but it's not impossible. Now, let's go back to globalization and then COVID. So globalization means that it's almost like a monoculture of the mind. In the sense that we become consumers, become conversant with products that are available anywhere in the world. You walk into a mall in India, you walk into a mall in the USA, you walk into a mall in Europe, China, Japan, wherever you say, and the kind of products that are on display on the shelves are very much the same, right? So that is the monoculture. And our consumer tastes have also become very, very regulated, in the sense that we seem to aspire for things that the rest of the world is consuming. So what happens is the diversity of products are slowly disappearing because the market forces are pushing for a globalized system. Fair enough. Then comes COVID. The supply chains get disrupted.
Right.
There is a lockdown in almost all countries of the world. Now what happens? People still survive, right?
Yeah.
And they survive because they are dependent on things that are locally produced. Now, which means that it is possible for different parts of the world to survive on consumption and production of things in a local area. So in our institutions, we talk about a green supply chain.
Yes.
And a green supply chain is nothing but producing and consuming things within a particular geographical area. Now that is not just a possibility, that is the reality that we will need to go to. Because imagine a situation where we run out of petroleum, which is likely to happen in if not my lifetime, in your lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what would happen if we run out of petroleum? How will the supply chains run? So people, technocrats would say that we would come up with an alternative. I'm not so sure about it, but which means that we would need to reduce our carbon footprint, especially for our basic needs.
Right.
So there are a lot of places in the Northeast, or were places in the Northeast, which did not eat rice.
Yeah.
Right? They would eat millets, they would eat yam, they would eat other kinds of things. But we have come to a situation where our food habits have become globalized. So the two most important grains that we are dependent on is rice and wheat. And both rice and wheat require a lot of water to be used for their cultivation. Now, and we are running out of water. So if we are to prevent global hunger, we would have to foster the cultivation of food grains that are indigenous to that area. So, say millet. Millet is supposed to be the wonder food, very, very expensive in the malls and all that. But that was something that the common man used. Bajra, common man used. So the thing is, it's not very difficult to go back, and probably the situation is coming that we would have to go back to local products at some point of time. And instead of doing it under duress, instead of doing it under pressure like COVID, I think we're smart enough, we should do it on our own volition. We should try and do it when there's still a lot of time.
Yeah, right. That's what like my friends also want to do. Like Chetan, who you were like connecting, who I connected through. So they also plan to have their own land, do their own farming, and do that's their old age retirement plan. And they also do not want a very flashy sort of lifestyle. They want to go buy some farmland in the corner of some small town India, and then have enough sufficient resources to survive for a family. So that's what my peers are aiming for, since cities like Mumbai and Delhi, they have become so much polluted.
I'm actually entertaining an idea to create like a kitchen garden and maybe have the spices and herbs I want to grow, because I see hydroponics by farmers in cities, and there are people who have made artificial greenhouses and storage units for growing their plants. And I think the world is evolving towards sourcing their own needs, as in responding to it. And you see them in the market as well. Now Blinkit sells a lot more kinds of mushrooms than you would have had before, because there are private sellers who are selling these to Blinkits from their own homes.
True.
Yeah.
So there's this great example of Cuba. So there are documentaries available on the net on this. So what had happened is the USSR had collapsed, and Cuba, as you would know, is under embargo from the USA for decades now. Ever since it was born, I mean, it has had to face embargoes. So its biggest supporter was the USSR, and most of its oil and petroleum, fertilizers, etc. is to come from the USSR. Now, when the USSR collapsed, its biggest pipeline, Cuba's biggest pipeline for survival, was gone. And overnight, it ran out of its petroleum. It ran out of fertilizers. It ran out of everything that it needed to just survive. Of course, Venezuela was there, which was helping it out, but that was too less, and the embargo was also taking its toll. Now, what they did was they had a failure of the electricity systems. They couldn't generate because of the lack of petroleum. They had no fertilizers. They couldn't run cars. They couldn't run tractors. They couldn't run lifts. So it was a mess. So everybody thought that Cuba would collapse.
Yeah.
Now, what they did was they did exactly what Sanchari was talking about. So not only every household started their own kitchen gardens, but every locality, they started their community gardens. So they started growing the vegetables, they started growing their necessities, and which did not need too much of transport. They tried hydroponics, they imported a whole lot of bicycles from China. And so from vehicles, they went off to bicycles, and they did very well. So they didn't do it because they wanted sustainability, but overnight, from being a very, very carbon heavy economy, they became something that all people talking about sustainability aspire for, and they did it under political duress. They set up the hospitals that were there were far off in the cities and all. So transporting people to hospitals was a nightmare. They didn't have enough vehicles and all that because there was hardly any petroleum available. So what they did was they started those clinics, neighborhood clinics. And soon, Cuba produced so many doctors that during COVID, the only country that was helping out other nations with doctors was Cuba.
Oh my God.
It was an amazing thing. So I think that example can be taken. They produced, and all of this food that they were producing were natural, organic food. And people started moving around in bicycles. They became healthier. And it was an entire country that transitioned from being a heavy carbon footprint country to a country that became almost self-sufficient in a number of areas. So that's a fascinating example.
So I knew about the Cuba embargo case, but we had been told another example of this situation where consumerism did not take off in this country like it did in other countries that were following the Keynes law back then, that the more you supply, the more demand rises. Cuba was against this. I think South Korea was against this, and these are the countries that have flourished because they've only produced almost as much as they needed and a little bit more for exports if possible.
True. So consumerism by definition is destined to fail. And why I'm saying so, people take it with a pinch of salt when I say this. Now, you are working in private companies, and you know this very well, that each year the target set keeps on going up, right? It's like a hockey stick curve, exponential growth. Now you're looking at a world with finite resources. You cannot increase the size of this earth, it's finite. You cannot increase the amount of petroleum underneath the soil, that's finite. You cannot increase anything at all. Which means that with finite resources, how can you create a system that is supposed to grow and grow and grow every year? It's not possible. So the only way for consumerism to survive is that you and I start consuming more. But if we keep on consuming more, then there is going to be a scarcity at some point of time because we're going to run out of resources.
Plus, valuing more means wasting more.
Yes. And the other thing about, since both of you are also related to finance, what happens is the amount of money as a resource available to the population cannot grow exponentially, right? Money has to be linked to the goods and services that are produced. Now, most people do not have the money to buy the stuff that's there on the stores. Now, the US is a prime example where an average American student has about 5 credit cards. So you don't have the money, it doesn't matter. You buy it on credit, and if you have credit problems in this card, you start using the other one, and then the other one, and the other one. So in other words, it's a big bubble.
Yeah.
And this big financial bubble is coming to countries like India. Traditionally, in the world economy, India and Japan were the two countries with the highest rate of savings. People would always spend within their incomes. I mean, even as kids, we were told by our parents that you should always learn to spend what you have, not beyond what you have. So that's a principle that is ingrained in our psyche. But now we are creating a new generation saying that it doesn't matter if you don't have it. You can always take a loan. But how do you repay that loan? So education is based on loans. Consumerism is based on loans. And everybody, a 5-year-old child is quite aware of EMIs. No?
Yeah.
And that's a shame.
They should be aware of taxes though.
Yes. So we need to radically change the way we're looking at things. And I feel quite optimistic when I talk to young people. She referred to Chetan. And Chetan was doing a course in IIM Shillong, and I met him there, and then we have been in touch on and off. And so when I talk to people like him, I know that the young are thinking in the right direction. But there are not enough of the young thinking in that direction. So the job of people like you is to increase the band, right? Start thinking differently. Because life is not just about consuming. Life is about creativity. Life is about each one of us, each individual. We have our fingerprints are different, right? There are billions of people, but no two people have the same fingerprints.
Yeah.
Which means that all of us are with certain qualities that are unique to us. And life is about discovering those qualities. What is your quality? I don't know. And the tragedy is, what is my quality also? I may not know.
Yeah.
So the entire system needs to create an enabling atmosphere where we are told that earning more is not what you're here for. Trying to consume more is not what you're here for. You're here to discover that unique quality that God has placed in you, to explore it, develop it so that it also benefits others. And that's what creativity is all about.
So, very well said. I think, I don't know my quality, but Professor Sanjeeb, you're a very good storyteller, like from this conversation so far. So for the indigenous practices also to spread, for instance, Sanjari said that she wants to do a kitchen garden and Chetan wants to do his own farm and all of the things like that. So I went to a lady who was trying to maintain her 2-acre property, and she had actually this shikakai. She planted shikakai, and then it spread all over her farm. And then she was telling everyone, do not put shikakai on your fences. So all of that knowledge needs to come. So what do you do you think we have sufficient people who can now pass on that kind of indigenous knowledge? And what would be the role of storytelling going forward?
Two things here. First thing is, we do have, or should I put it in the past tense? We had a whole lot of knowledge that's fast disappearing. Because the education that you and I have received and the younger generation are receiving is essentially Eurocentric. Yeah. It has nothing of the indigenous, it has nothing of the local. Right? So just remember your nursery rhymes and stories that you read and all that. Jack and Jill went up the hill and stuff like that. So which means that the educational system would need to incorporate certain indigenous knowledge traits. But in order to incorporate it, it would need to be documented. It needs to be written. Now, a lot of our traditions are actually embedded in stories. And we're losing those stories. So indigenous knowledge systems, what it talks about is, it talks about respect for all life forms. Okay. So it could be an ant it could be a spider, it could be the microbes in the soil. Everything is deserving of respect because we are a complex ecosystem where a handful of soil underneath your feet could contain a few billion, and I'm repeating, a few billion microbes.
Yeah.
And these microbes are interacting with one another so that the soil is a living entity. Now, if you're going to treat the soil as a factor of production, lifeless, and you just increase the urea or whatever in order to increase production, at some point of time, you kill off all the microbes and the soil becomes barren. So that's one. So so indigenous knowledge systems talks about respect for all life forms. Okay. Now the second thing is there are certain species which are invasive, alien species that you introduce into a land, and that species takes over all the others and creates problems. So it is necessary to create. Now this 2-acre land could possibly become a starting point to start production using traditional knowledge and come up with an income that is sufficient for her and maybe her family. Now, in this 2-acre land, it's always possible to keep a few beehives. Okay. Now the bees help in the pollination. They keep away other pests, and also is a very good source of income. Second is, again, monoculture is a problem because the different nutrients of the soil are utilized by different plants in a different way. So legumes like beans are supposed to regenerate the soil. Okay. So it's supposed to be a nitrogen fixer. So in that plot of land where you grow beans for one season and the next season some other crop might do very well. So you need to have that interspersing of different kinds of crops to give you the best. And then in the same plot of land you could have a few large trees which might give you the fruits and also gives shade to the plants around, so that the need for irrigation and stuff like that becomes lesser. So it's a very interesting, it's almost like the human body. You can't say that my heart is perfectly okay but my lungs are gone, right?
Yeah.
It's interrelated. My kidneys are okay but my liver is gone. I mean, any one portion of the body that's gone will have a effect on the other part. So that's what the indigenous systems talk about. They talk about respect. And Gandhi, he was able to, simplify this in just a sentence, as was his ability. He said there is enough in this world for every man's need, not for every man's greed. Now, we have created an economic system whereby 1% of the population, they have control over almost 67-70% of the resources. 10% of the population controls about 90% of the resources, and 90% of the people have access to 10% of the resources. Now, this is something which cannot continue for too long. It's an imbalance, right? So again, being a civilizational historian, this I can tell you that a human life, I can't expect to live for more than 100 years. That's stretching it quite a bit. Normal lifespan is about 60, 70, whatever. So being optimistic, let's take it at 100 years. Yeah. So you and I will live to be 100 years, hopefully. And a civilization has been around for, the Indian civilization is supposed to be about 5,000 years old. Egyptian civilization about 5,000 years old. So what is 100 years and 5,000? Very small.
Yeah.
Human beings like you and me have been around in this world for close to 2 lakh years, 200,000 years. Some say it's 1,85,000 years. Okay, either 1,85,000, 2 lakh years, doesn't matter, right? Now, 100 years, I live, and human beings like you and me have been around for 1,85,000 to 2 lakh years. So I'm not even a pinprick in that scale.
Yeah.
Now, okay, 2 lakh years seems to be a big, and our knowledge of the past is confined to 5,000 years of civilization. So what happened in that 1,95,000 or 1,80,000 years? We have very little idea. Now, what is the age of this universe? It's supposed to be 4.5 billion years. 4.5 billion years? And this earth has existed. So whenever we are talking about sustainability, actually we are not talking about the sustainability of the planet. We are talking about the sustainability of you and I.
Yeah.
We will continue to use electricity, we'll continue to drive cars, we'll continue to do things, and we want the next generation to be able to use it.
Yeah.
Right? But this world has been around for 4.5 billion years. Human beings like you and me have been there for 2 lakh years. My life is 100 years. And who am I to determine the destiny of this planet, which has been there for 4.5 billion years, right? So the sixth great extinction is supposed to be happening now. And at the top of the list is the human being. Okay, so let's stop imagining that we're trying to save the planet. We're trying to save ourselves and our lives.
Yeah.
And even if we disappear, the earth will continue like it has always done.
Right.
So we need to adapt ourselves to living in harmony with nature. And that is, I think, a takeaway that I would like to give you guys and spread it around.
Yes.
I'm loving the tagline here. Climate scientists are basically trying to sustain our own lives most comfortably.
Right.
The industry as such, for example, now COP29 is happening. Some promises were supposed to be made. Developing nations are asking developed nations to finance them for decarbonization, and there are no, as such, there has been no movement going on so far. So all of this, while developed nations did develop themselves, they became like bigger economy, and developing nations are now facing the brunt of all of this. Like now we have air pollution, we have extremely high temperatures. We are not also talking about the injustice that has happened. So how do you look at that, like this, all of this injustice?
Yeah, it's unjust, yes. But there's another aspect to this. What happens is, imagine that we are all of us in a big swimming pool. Okay, the earth is a big swimming pool. And I go to your corner of the pool and I dirty it. And then I quickly swim back to my corner and say that my corner is clean. But you have dirtied the entire pool, right?
Yeah.
So what is happening is that, yes, rich nations have, in terms of carbon emission, I think the USA is 70 times more than what India is doing. But and they want to continue doing it even at a larger scale. So yes, there is a huge injustice, but that injustice is also going to bite the developed nations, and it's already happening, right? It's going to bite them. Spain, if you notice the recent floods and occurrences, it's going to hit them. We may be hit harder, but it will hit them as well, and then it's going to be a problem. That's one. So it's this injustice, if you put it to scale, at this point of time, it's hitting the developing nations and the poorer countries more. But it's inevitable that it's going to hit everyone, and it's going to hit everyone very hard. So there is some kind of divine justice that's awaiting all of us. You can't hide behind large walls and big buildings. It's going to reach you. Second, it's a sobering thought. There are 9 planetary boundaries. They said that scientists have come up with 9 planetary boundaries, saying that if we cross the limits in these, the world will be in a danger zone. Out of 9,
6.
We have crossed 6. And we are all in for crossing the other 2. So that will make it 8. And if 8 is gone, the last one standing will soon fall. So which means that it is no longer that we are about to experience climate crisis. We are already in the midst of it. Okay. So, yes, all of us are trying to kind of do a little bit to try and change things, but I'm not too sure whether it's too little, too late.
So you have but some expectations from the youth of the country that if they change their mindset to, for example, not being consumeristic or being in touch with the indigenous knowledge, maybe there is still a chance to save.
Yes. And in any case, our lifetimes are short, no?
Yeah.
So supposing I live my life well, so at the end of the day, when I reach the end of my journey in this life, at least I can look back and say that I may not have changed the entire world, but I certainly did what I could. So the young people in most parts of the world who are concerned about what's happening, they have adopted something known as minimalism.
Right.
If I can survive with 3 shirts, why should I have 10 shirts?
Right.
If consuming is not is not what I am wedded to. I am wedded to living life to the fullest.
Right.
So there's another movement that's going on that's called decluttering. So people are opening up their closets, they're opening up their homes and seeing the kind of things that they have never used in the last few years, and they said, why do I need this for? Yeah. So they give it away, right? So A, minimalism, and B is decluttering lives. So we have a great teacher in Gandhiji again. I mean, a lot of stuff when I read as a young man, I couldn't understand, I couldn't agree with him. But the more of the stuff that he wrote, I read now, I realized that that guy was way beyond his age. I mean, he saw into the future and he knew what he was talking about. So minimalism might have become something popular now, but after he came back from England, he went to Africa and then came to India. When he came into India, he was suited and booted, you know. And when he landed in India and he went around India, he realized that majority of the people are with just one garment. So he discarded his suit and he started wearing that one handspun cloth, one piece. And they call him the naked fakir. So that's minimalism at its best. I'm not saying that people need to emulate him into that extreme, but we can certainly do.
Right.
In a small little ways. Now, skeptics might ask that what difference is it going to make? When I go to a restaurant, I normally refuse bottled water. I said, just give me normal water. Yeah. Now, people might say that what difference is it going to make, one bottle? I said, I don't know what difference it's going to make to the world, but for me and my well-being and my peace of mind, I think it does. I walk rather than use a vehicle if I can. I try and do a lot of stuff. Before starting talking to you guys, I was just testing out the pens on my table. You normally have a lot of pens, and I found that, okay, number 1, not writing, number 2, not writing. And I was looking at them, they look fairly good. But what option do I have other than throwing them to the waste bin, right? So we have designed our lives in such a way. When I was young, we used to have ink pens where you can refill.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we don't use them so much anymore. So if the refill is over, you throw the entire pen. We have become so wasteful.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but that's the way we are.
There was a shopkeeper once when I went to refill my pens, because back then 7th, 8th standard, not always are you going to have enough money if you're from a middle class family to go and buy a pen every time it's over, especially when you are a student who takes a lot of notes. So I went to get the pen refilled, and the guy at the shop says, it's 7 rupees to get a refill. It's 10 rupees for a pen. You can just get a pen. And I said, no, just give me the refill, because I've already come a long way for this. If I needed a pen, I could have just got a pen from the shop nearby, right?
True. So we have become a very wasteful society.
Agreed.
And the cost of production is never factored in. We are just looking at the cost of the raw material and the cost of production, and that is the price. But there is another cost which needs to be factored in, and that's the environmental cost. So if the environmental cost is factored in, the prices would be really high, then people would start reusing things like they once used to. I think that's something that we need to do.
Right, Professor Kakoty. So we are almost towards the end. And so there are some rapid fire questions. They're not really rapid fire. So if there could be one sustainability policy that could be implemented across India, what would that be according to you?
I had this conversation with our former president. He used to come and teach in our institute, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam.
Oh.
And we were talking. I mean, he was somebody who could just put his arms around you and sit down as if you're a long lost friend and talk. So we were talking about this. And so one big challenge that not only India but the rest of the world faces is the migration of people to the metros. There's a huge movement of people. And supposing people migrate and they need space to live, the civic facilities are under enormous stress, transport, food, waste, everything. So the biggest sustainability challenge before us is to prevent migration. But you don't prevent migration like some leaders are trying to do by putting up fences and walls. You prevent migration by giving people the facilities within their own villages.
Yeah.
Something that they aspire to get in the towns. So that is, they need livelihood options, they need food, they need water, they need schooling, they need healthcare facilities, they need good communication. So he came up with a model which he called the PURA model, providing urban amenities in rural areas. So supposing each, and this was something that Gandhi also talked about when he talked about Ram Rajya. So Ram Rajya had nothing to do with religion really.
Yeah.
It had more to do with Gram Swaraj. So he was saying that every village needs to develop as an autonomous unit of development. And the PURA model is also talking something like that. Now, supposing we are able to develop, because India lives in her villages. Even now, more than, I think around 70% of the people live in the villages, but in the next 10, 20 years, unless we develop the hinterland, things are going to get bad. So we need to have a justice in the development. Justice in the development scene would not mean the growth of billionaires in India. It would mean that every Indian is entitled to a modicum of income and respect. So we need to develop all the areas of India, not just the metros or the SEZs, and put in income into the hands of every Indian, and provide those facilities that act as magnets which exist in the cities, and so that they do not even have the need to leave their villages and live like outcast in the metros. Now, technology can play a big role. You cannot have top class schools in the villages, they say. We are having this conversation, lovely conversation, I should say, sitting in different parts of the world through the use of technology, right? So there's no reason why a good teacher cannot connect with teachers in the villages through the use of technology. So the need for good education is met through technology. The need for medical support can be met through technology. Telemedicine is another one. The search for markets could end with technology. So we've got to leverage technology that will help the across. So my thing would be that we need to develop the country as a whole and make people so interested in living wherever they are, because the quality of lives are better in the villages. And that could be the sustainable solution that I can think of.
Very nice. In fact, like we are thinking of migrating back now. We are in Mumbai. So possibly many people like me are thinking of going back to like town. And so, but the rates are also going up because so many people are thinking.
Right.
So which one is your favorite place in Northeast? This is for us.
It's got to be Shillong. I was born here. I've lived all my life here. No matter where I go in the world, I always come back to Shillong.
Yeah.
So
Shillong,
I love this place. But anywhere in the Northeast, I'd be at home. But Shillong is my home, so I love Shillong.
If you had to recommend one book or documentary on sustainability, what would it be?
There are a whole lot of books. It's very, very difficult to recommend one book.
Okay, 2-3 books.
Actually, I just was recommended a book, and it doesn't talk about sustainability like that. It talks about sustainability in a backhanded manner.
Sure.
Okay, so it actually ridicules the development model that we have. And this book is by this author Daniel Quinn. Daniel Quinn, and the name of the book is Ishmael, Ishmael.
Okay.
So Ishmael is a gorilla, and a human being has a conversation with this gorilla. So this gorilla raises certain questions, which are very, very tough. They are critical of the path that human beings have taken. So after you read this book, you really get interested in sustainability. So I think that could be a one book that you could start with. There are certain other classics which takes you on that path. I don't want to talk about books that deals with sustainability per se, because I would want people to read this before they get into sustainability. So the other book which is considered to be very, very influential is The Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. So here she talks about the effects of using chemicals on human life. And there was one spring where in the Americas, in the place where she lived, there were no birds. There's no bird song. Can you imagine spring without bird song? So she called it the silent spring. And the birds had died because chemicals were used somewhere. So that's one book that woke up the world to the concept of the use of chemicals. And since we are also interested in business models, maybe, or models of economic growth, there is a book which again is considered to be a classic, and this book is by Schumacher. It is called Small is Beautiful. So economic models need not be large. It can be small, and small can be beautiful. So somebody's come up with a sequel. I've not yet read it. They said small is profitable. Got to read it. After I read it, maybe I'll tell you sometime.
Awesome. Very beautiful conversation, Professor Kakoty. We really enjoyed it. And in fact, we have very good recommendations from you to read and possibly review. And it was really nice talking to you. Thank you for coming. Do you have any other message for Sustainability Sisters?
No message as such, because the moment you say message, you feel like a messiah. And we are all in search of the messiah. So I know times are tough. I know I myself am filled with a lot of negativity about the way we are headed. But look, don't always look at the large picture. Look at the smaller picture. Look at what you can do. I have used the lift in our institute twice in so many years that I worked there. And both times when I had such a backache that I could not take the stairs. But I see young people routinely use the lift. So what I'm saying is that if you can avoid doing something that's harming the environment, let's do it. Increase your fan speed and put your AC setting slightly higher. It works the same.
Yeah, actually, we also have a very passionate environment. My neighbor is also very passionate. We both share, and she does CSR. And during summers in Mumbai, she goes and she purposefully sits in the sun. So she says that I am now getting accustomed to the heat, so that I don't have to use ACs. Like till some temperatures, possibly she can do it. So
let's do small little things and be positive. And in any case, we are not responsible for everything that's going around, right? We are responsible for our own lives.
Yes.
So live your life. I try and live my life in a way that's not harmful to others. So before we can do good, we should try and not do harm, right?
Right.
So I think keep your spirits up.
Thank you, Professor Sanjeeb. That gives us
Thank you.
lots of spirits. Thank you for coming to our channel. And all
Thank
the
you very
best. Have a
much.
good rest of the day. Thank you, Sanchari.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And all the best to whatever you're doing.
Thank you so much.
We need more people like you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Take care.